She cooked for ranch hands, until a stranger with a dark past walked in and changed her life forever. It was small, with wooden tables and chairs that creaked slightly whenever someone sat down. The walls were decorated with old photographs of the ranch from decades ago and a few paintings she had made herself. Every morning, before the sun peeked over the hills, Emma would wake up and start preparing breakfast. The smell of freshly baked bread, sizzling bacon, and brewed coffee filled the air, welcoming the ranch hands and farmers who came in for their first meal of the day. Running the diner was not always easy. Some mornings were cold and harsh, and the wind would whistle through the cracks of the windows, carrying dust from the fields. Other mornings, the sun would rise in a golden blaze, lighting up the entire town in a warm glow. Emma loved both the quiet and the chaos. She enjoyed cooking for the ranch hands, watching them laugh and joke, and sometimes telling stories about the old days when the ranch was full of activity and excitement. She had learned over the years to prepare meals quickly but with care. Every plate she served was made with attention, every cup of coffee poured with thought. For Emma, cooking wasn't just a job, it was a way of showing love and care, even to people she barely knew. The ranch hands were a rugged group, strong from long days of work under the hot sun and cold nights on the fields. They often came in tired, with dust on their boots and sweat on their foreheads. But when they stepped into Emma's diner, their moods would lift. The warmth of the food, the smell of bread and stew, and Emma's welcoming smile had a way of making even the hardest men feel at home. Some of them had been coming to her diner for years. They had families and troubles of their own, yet for a few hours each day, they could forget their worries and enjoy a meal and conversation. Emma liked seeing them relax. She liked being the person who made their day a little easier, a little brighter. Despite the joy she felt in serving others, Emma sometimes felt a quiet longing. Her life was peaceful and safe, but it was also predictable. Every day followed the same rhythm. Wake up, prepare breakfast, serve the ranch hands, clean the diner, prepare lunch, clean again, and finally close the diner at night. She loved her routine, but there was a part of her that wondered if there was more out there. She thought about the people who traveled to the town from faraway places, the stories they must carry with them, and the adventures she might never experience if she stayed in her little diner forever. Emma had dreams, even if they were small. Sometimes, as she stood by the window and watched the sun set over the fields, she imagined a life filled with change, excitement, or even a kind of love she had not yet found. Even on the busiest days, Emma found beauty in the little moments. She liked the way the morning light hit the wooden tables, the way a freshly baked pie smelled as it came out of the oven, and the way the ranch hands' laughter echoed in the diner. She noticed details that others might overlook: a bird perched on a fence, a patch of wildflowers growing by the road, or a stray cloud moving slowly across the blue sky. These small things made her life feel rich, even if it seemed simple to anyone else. And in those moments, she felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that she had created a space where people could feel safe and cared for, if only for a short while. One particular morning, Emma rose earlier than usual. The air was crisp, and the ground still held the chill from the night. She had a feeling that today might be different, though she couldn't say why. She prepared the dough for the day's bread, chopped vegetables for the stew, and brewed coffee strong enough to wake even the sleepiest ranch hand. As she moved through the kitchen, humming softly to herself, she felt a sense of pride. Her diner was her world, and she had worked hard to make it a place of warmth and comfort. She knew every corner, every utensil, and every recipe by heart. Yet deep down, a small part of her hoped that someone, or something, would arrive to shake her world just a little. By mid-morning, the diner began to fill with regular customers. Tom, the eldest ranch hand, came in first, followed by others who had finished their morning chores. Emma greeted each of them with a smile and a few kind words. They talked about the weather, the animals, and the small events in town. Emma listened carefully, laughing at their jokes and offering advice when they asked. She felt like she was part of their world and they were part of hers. Even though she had never left the town for long, through the people who came to her diner, she experienced a small piece of the wider world, its joys, its struggles, and its simple, everyday wonders. Despite the comfort of her routine, there were moments when loneliness crept in. After the last customer had left and the diner was quiet, Emma would sit by the counter with a cup of tea, thinking about life beyond the fields and hills. She wondered what it would be like to meet someone new, someone whose stories and experiences were different from her own. She imagined conversations that went beyond weather and chores, conversations that touched hearts and shared dreams. Though she never admitted it to anyone, Emma longed for a change, something that would make her heart race and remind her that life was full of surprises. Emma's connection to her diner went beyond cooking. She knew the importance of each meal she prepared. A hot breakfast could start a ranch hand's day with energy and positivity. A simple conversation over lunch could ease the burdens of someone's heart. And sometimes, she realized, her kindness and attention were exactly what people needed to feel human in a hard, demanding world. She didn't do it for praise or thanks, though she appreciated them, but because it made her feel alive. In her own way, Emma believed that feeding others was feeding her soul too. As the day ended and the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Emma cleaned the diner, prepared a small dinner for herself, and sat by the window, reflecting on the day. She thought about the ranch hands, their smiles, and their gratitude. She thought about her dreams and the tiny spark of hope she carried for something different, something extraordinary. Even in her simple life, she found joy, beauty, and meaning. But she also felt, somewhere deep inside, that life had more in store for her than just routine and familiar faces. Something, or someone, might be waiting to step into her world, and when that happened, everything could change. And though Emma didn't know it yet, that day marked the quiet before the arrival of a stranger who would walk into her diner, bringing with him stories, challenges, and a life-changing journey. But for now, she continued her life as she always had, cooking with care, listening with attention, and living with hope, unaware that the first ripple of change was already on its way. The following day, the diner was quiet, just as Emma liked in the mornings before the ranch. Hands arrived. She was arranging the chairs, sweeping the floor, and checking the ingredients for the day's meals when she noticed a figure walking along the dusty road outside. He moved with a slow, deliberate pace, carrying a worn leather bag. There was something different about him, something in his posture that caught her attention. He wasn't like the usual ranch hands who came in covered in dust and sweat, eager for a hot breakfast. This man seemed careful, almost cautious, as if he was carrying more than just a bag with him. Emma watched as he reached the diner and pushed the door open. The bell above the door jingled softly, announcing his presence. He stepped inside, and for a moment the entire diner felt still, as though time had paused. He was tall, with dark hair that fell slightly into his eyes, which were deep and serious. His clothes were simple but neat, and there was a faint weariness about him, as if he had traveled a long distance or carried heavy burdens. He glanced around the diner with curiosity, noticing the wooden tables, the photographs on the walls, and the faint aroma of bread and stew. Then he approached the counter and gave Emma a small, polite nod. "Good morning," he said, his voice low but calm. Emma returned his greeting with a smile. "Good morning. What can I get for you?" He looked at the menu board, but instead of ordering immediately, he paused as though considering something more than just food. Finally, he said, "Just coffee, please, black." Emma nodded and began preparing a fresh cup. She watched him from the corner of her eye, curious about the stranger. He didn't seem in a hurry, yet there was an air of caution in the way he moved. The way he placed his bag gently on the floor beside him, and the way he looked around without speaking to anyone. The ranch hands who were sitting at the tables glanced at him briefly, then returned to their meals. They were used to seeing new faces now and then, but none of them had the quiet, serious presence that this man carried. When Emma placed the coffee in front of him, he gave a small, appreciative smile. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome," Emma replied. "Are you new around here?" He hesitated for a moment before answering. "Yes, just passing through for now." There was a hint of sadness in his voice, a trace of something unspoken. Emma sensed it immediately, though she didn't know why. She had always been observant, noticing the small details in people's expressions, their movements, and their tone of voice. There was a story behind those eyes, a past that he wasn't sharing yet, and Emma felt a mixture of curiosity and concern. She returned to her tasks, preparing plates of food and serving the ranch hands, but she couldn't help glancing at him occasionally. Over the next few days, the stranger continued to visit the diner. Each time, he ordered the same thing, a cup of black coffee and occasionally a small sandwich or pastry. He sat in the same corner, quietly observing, sometimes scribbling notes in a small notebook he kept with him. Emma noticed that he never asked for much conversation, but he always responded politely when she spoke to him. Slowly, a pattern began to emerge. The stranger was careful, quiet, and deliberate, yet he seemed to appreciate the warmth and simplicity of her diner. Emma's curiosity grew. Who was he, really? Why did he carry himself with such caution? And what had brought him to their quiet town and her small diner? She had many customers over the years, some who came and left without a second thought, and some who stayed for a while, sharing their stories. But there was something different about this man. He seemed weighted, as if life had taught him lessons the hard way, lessons that left marks visible in the corners of his eyes and the slight tension in his shoulders. One afternoon, as the sun poured golden light through the windows, the stranger finally spoke more than a few words. Emma had prepared a small plate of freshly baked bread with honey and placed it in front of him. He looked at it for a moment, then looked up at her. "Why do you do this?" he asked quietly, nodding toward the food. "Why do you go to so much trouble for strangers?" Emma paused, considering her answer. She could have said it was her job or that it was just what people did in her town, but the truth was more personal. She wanted her diner to be a place of comfort, a space where people could feel safe and cared for, even if only for a short time. "Because it matters," she said finally. "Sometimes people just need to feel noticed, appreciated. A meal can be more than food. It can be a small comfort when life is hard." The stranger nodded slowly, as if her words had reached a part of him he rarely allowed others to see. He took a bite of the bread, savoring it quietly, and for a moment there was silence between them, a peaceful silence filled only with the gentle sounds of the diner, the clinking of dishes, the soft hum of conversation, and the distant wind outside. Days turned into weeks, and the stranger's visits became a routine. Emma found herself looking forward to them, not just because of curiosity, but because he was different. He listened when she spoke, sometimes offering thoughtful comments or questions, and other times just nodding, showing that he cared. Slowly, she learned a few details about him. He had traveled a lot, had faced difficulties, and had made mistakes in his past that still haunted him. He didn't share everything, and Emma never pushed, but even the small glimpses into his life were enough to intrigue her. The ranch hands began to notice too. Some whispered among themselves about the stranger who came every day, noting how quiet and mysterious he was. Others speculated about his past, inventing stories based on what little they could see. But Emma didn't mind the whispers. She focused on her work and on understanding the stranger, feeling a connection that went beyond casual conversation. There was a calmness in his presence that contrasted with the rough energy of the ranch hands, a quiet strength that made her feel safe and curious at the same time. One evening, As Emma was closing the diner, the stranger lingered longer than usual. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the room, and the diner was empty except for the two of them. He spoke softly, almost hesitantly. "Emma, I've been running from a lot," he said. "From mistakes, from people, from myself. I don't usually stay in one place. But here, this diner, you make it feel different, safe, honest. I don't know why I feel I can talk to you, but I do." Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had always wanted connection, someone to understand her quiet life and share a piece of their world with her. "It's okay," she said gently. "You can talk if you want. I won't judge and I won't push you. Sometimes just sharing is enough." For the first time, the stranger looked truly at ease. He spoke for a long while, sharing fragments of his life, troubles, regrets, and moments of hope he had held onto despite everything. Emma listened, offering small reassurances, nodding and occasionally smiling. The diner, once just a place of meals and routine, had become a bridge between two worlds. Hers, filled with simplicity and care, and his, filled with shadows but beginning to find light. By the time he left that evening, Emma felt something shift inside her. She realized that life, even in its ordinary routines, could bring unexpected encounters that changed everything. She didn't know where this stranger would go or how much of his story he would share, but she felt that meeting him was the beginning of something new, something that might challenge her, excite her, and change the quiet rhythm of her life forever. And as she cleaned the diner that night, listening to the soft hum of the empty room and the distant sounds of the town settling into evening, Emma knew one thing for certain: her life was about to change. The stranger had walked in, carrying more than just a bag and a past. He had brought the first spark of something extraordinary. Over the following weeks, the stranger continued to visit the diner almost every day. Emma had begun to notice small details about him that made her curious and cautious at the same time. He always chose the same corner seat, never the one by the window or the counter, and he seemed to have a small routine of his own. Setting his bag carefully on the floor, taking out a notebook, and occasionally scribbling something while sipping his coffee. But what intrigued Emma the most was the way he observed the people around him. He didn't just look, he noticed. He noticed the subtle gestures, the way the ranch hands laughed, the quiet sighs of those who seemed troubled, and even the small acts of kindness that Emma herself often overlooked in her busy routine. At first, their conversations were limited. She would ask simple questions about where he came from or if he needed anything, and he would answer politely but briefly. Yet over time, the stranger began to open up, though always cautiously. One late afternoon, when the diner was quiet and the sunlight cast long shadows across the floor, he spoke more than he had before. "I've made mistakes," he said softly, not looking directly at her. "Mistakes that I can't take back. People I've hurt, places I've left behind. I've been running for a long time." Emma paused in her work, placing a plate of food gently on the counter. She didn't interrupt, letting him speak. There was a calm strength about her that seemed to invite trust without forcing it. "You're not alone in carrying regrets," she said finally, her voice gentle. "Everyone has something in their past. What matters is what we do next, how we choose to live now." He looked at her then, really looked, as if seeing her for the first time. There was a mixture of relief, gratitude, and something unspoken. An acknowledgement that, in this small diner, he had found a safe space where he could breathe without judgment. Emma realized that for all his quiet and careful manner, there was a part of him that wanted connection, a part that longed to be understood. Over the next few visits, the stranger began sharing small stories from his past, carefully, piece by piece. He spoke of cities he had traveled through, of jobs he had taken to survive, of friendships that had ended abruptly, and of moments he wished he could undo. Each story was tinged with regret, but also with lessons learned and resilience gained. Emma listened attentively, sometimes asking questions, sometimes just nodding. She was fascinated not only by his experiences, but by the strength it must have taken to carry them and continue moving forward. As Emma listened, she began to notice changes in herself. She had always been kind and observant, but now she felt a deeper empathy, a stronger desire to connect and understand. She found herself thinking about him even when the diner was empty, wondering how he had survived his past and what had led him to their quiet town. She realized that she didn't just care about his stories, she cared about him. And she had to admit, even to herself, that she felt a quiet excitement every time the bell above the door jingled and he entered. Their bond grew in subtle ways. Emma would make a small extra plate of food for him, noticing his favorite bread or pastry. The stranger would occasionally leave a small note of thanks or a thoughtful comment scribbled in his notebook, which he would place on the table before leaving. They shared smiles, glances, and unspoken understanding that went beyond words. Emma had always found joy in serving others, but now she felt a deeper connection, a sense that her life was intertwined with someone else's in a meaningful way. However, the stranger's past was never far from his mind. One evening, after the diner had emptied and the sun had dipped below the horizon, he confided in Emma more deeply. He spoke of a mistake he had made years ago, one that had hurt people he cared about and forced him to leave behind everything familiar. His voice was heavy with regret, but there was also determination, a desire to make things right, even if he couldn't undo the past. Emma listened quietly, offering her presence rather than words of advice. She could feel the weight he carried, and she realized that the diner and her own kindness had become a sanctuary for him. It was a place where he could confront his past without fear, a place where he could begin to heal. She didn't try to fix his problems. She simply allowed him to share them, knowing that sometimes the act of being heard was the first step toward freedom. As days passed, Emma and the stranger developed a rhythm in their interactions. He would come in, she would prepare his coffee and meals, and they would talk, sometimes about serious things, sometimes about small, ordinary details of life. They shared laughter as well as silence, and Emma began to realize that this quiet companionship was filling a part of her life she hadn't even known was empty. She felt a sense of trust growing between them, a bond formed through shared stories, understanding, and simple human connection. Yet the stranger remained cautious. He never revealed everything at once and sometimes seemed distant, lost in thought. Emma respected his space, understanding that trust could not be rushed. She learned to read the subtle signs of his mood, the way his shoulders slumped when memories troubled him, or the faint smile that appeared when he felt safe and understood. These small signs guided her in offering comfort, conversation, or simply quiet companionship. Through these interactions, Emma began to notice changes in herself too. She became more patient, more reflective, and more aware of the complexities of human nature. She realized that every person carried stories, struggles, and secrets, and that kindness and understanding could make a profound difference. She also began to see the world beyond her diner differently, imagining possibilities and connections she had never considered before. The stranger's presence had awakened something in her, a sense of empathy, curiosity, and hope that life could be richer and more meaningful than she had imagined. One rainy afternoon, when the sky was gray and the wind rattled the windows, the stranger stayed longer than usual. He spoke quietly, almost hesitantly, about the people he had left behind and the mistakes he had made. Emma listened, occasionally offering words of encouragement, reminding him that everyone deserved a chance to start anew. There was a softness in her voice, a warmth that seemed to reach him even through the heaviness he carried. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to imagine a future where he could belong somewhere, where he could be accepted despite his past. Emma realized that their relationship had become more than just casual conversation. It had evolved into a connection built on trust, empathy, and shared understanding. She found herself caring deeply for him, wanting to support him, and quietly hoping that he would find the peace he sought. She also understood that this bond came with challenges. The stranger's past could resurface at any time, and the path ahead was uncertain. Yet she felt ready to face whatever came, knowing that human connection and compassion were powerful forces that could help them both grow. The weeks continued with quiet days of shared stories, meals, and gentle companionship. Emma's diner became a sanctuary not only for the stranger, but also for herself. She felt alive in a way she hadn't before, inspired by the courage it took for someone to face their past, and by her own ability to provide comfort and understanding. And while she didn't yet know the full story of the stranger's life, she felt certain that their meeting was no accident. Something had brought him to her diner, and in doing so, it had also brought her a new sense of purpose, connection, and hope. By the time the stranger began to leave the diner at night, Emma felt a sense of anticipation for the next day, wondering what he might share, what small revelations might come, and how their bond might deepen further. Life had shifted subtly, and she sensed that this was only the beginning. The stranger's past, though heavy, was slowly giving way to trust, understanding, and the possibility of redemption. And for Emma, each day brought the quiet thrill of witnessing transformation, not only in the man who had entered her life, but also in herself. She didn't know what challenges lay ahead, nor how the stranger's story would unfold. But for the first time in a long while, she felt ready for change, for growth, and for the unknown. The diner, once just a place of routine and simple meals, had become a bridge between past and present, pain and healing, solitude and connection. And in that space, Emma and the stranger were discovering that even the heaviest past could be met with understanding, and that hearts could open in ways that transformed lives forever. Life at the diner continued in a rhythm that was comforting yet slowly changing. Emma had grown used to the stranger's visits, and each day she found herself more curious about the person behind those serious eyes. But as their bond deepened, she also realized that life outside her little diner was not always gentle. The stranger carried shadows with him, shadows that sometimes reached into the quiet corners of her life. One morning, a rumor spread through the town. It started quietly, an overheard remark at the market, a whisper from one ranch hand to another, but it quickly reached the diner. Some of the locals had caught glimpses of the stranger entering the town, and their curiosity had twisted into speculation. "I heard he had a troubled past," one person said. "Not the kind of people we usually welcome here." Others nodded, shaking their heads, questioning why Emma would allow such a person to sit in her diner every day. Emma felt a mix of emotions. She knew only a fraction of his past, and yet she had come to trust him. She had seen the kindness beneath the cautious exterior, the care he showed in simple actions, and the sincerity in the way he shared his stories. But she also understood why others were wary. His history was unknown to them, and fear often thrived in the absence of understanding. She decided to continue as she always had, serving him with the same warmth, letting her actions speak for themselves. The stranger seemed aware of the whispers. On one visit, he entered the diner and paused by the door, looking around as if sensing the tension. He smiled faintly at Emma, but there was a shadow in his eyes. Emma noticed it immediately. He seemed heavier than usual, carrying the weight of judgment he could not escape. She approached him gently, placing a fresh cup of coffee on the table. "Don't mind them," she said softly. "You know who you are, and I know who you are." He nodded, and for a moment they shared a quiet understanding. Emma realized that part of the stranger's journey was not only about confronting his past, but also about learning to live despite it. And for her, part of the challenge was learning how to protect the connection they had built, without letting the fears of others affect her own judgment. Days passed, and the stranger's story slowly unfolded in fragments. He spoke of mistakes he had made in other towns, jobs he had lost, and people he had unintentionally hurt. His voice was often quiet, tinged with regret, but there was also a sense of determination, a desire to grow, to be better, and to make amends in small ways where he could. Emma listened, offering encouragement and understanding, knowing that this process of reflection and honesty was painful but necessary. Yet, external pressures were unavoidable. One afternoon, a local rancher approached Emma while she was taking inventory in the back of the diner. His tone was firm but not unkind. "Emma, I've heard about the man you've been letting come here," he said. "People are talking. You should be careful." Not everyone here trusts strangers with stories like his. Emma took a deep breath. "I appreciate your concern," she replied calmly, "but I trust him. He comes here every day and I've seen who he is, not who people think he might be. He's trying to make things right." The rancher hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I suppose only time will tell." Emma knew he was right. The stranger's past was complicated, and she could not control the town's opinions, but she could control her actions and her belief in the person he was becoming. And in her heart, she felt that this was worth standing up for, even if it meant facing judgment or gossip. The stranger, for his part, seemed to notice the tension. One evening, after the diner had emptied and the sun had begun to set in a sky streaked with pink and gold, he spoke quietly to Emma. "I've caused enough trouble in my life," he said. "I don't want to bring it here to you, to this place." Emma reached across the table, placing her hand gently on his. "You're not trouble," she said firmly. "You're human, and humans make mistakes, but they can also grow, learn, and change. That's what matters." He looked at her then, really looked, and she could see the conflict in his eyes. He wanted to trust, but fear of judgment and his own doubts made it hard. Emma understood. Trust, once broken or hidden, is never easy to rebuild. But she believed in the good in him, and she knew that her belief could give him the strength to face both his past and the challenges ahead. In the following weeks, their connection strengthened despite the obstacles. They shared small moments of joy, laughing over a spilled cup of coffee, sharing stories about the small quirks of the town, or simply enjoying the quiet presence of one another. Emma noticed that the stranger's eyes had begun to lighten, the tension in his shoulders easing just slightly. He was learning slowly that a person could care for him without judgment, that there could be a safe place in the world even after mistakes. But life, as Emma knew, rarely gave easy paths. One day, a letter arrived for the stranger at the diner. He opened it with a mix of apprehension and resignation. Emma watched quietly, sensing the importance of the moment. The letter contained news from his past, a person from a life he had tried to leave behind, seeking answers or closure. The weight of it pressed on him visibly. He didn't speak at first, simply staring at the envelope as though it contained the full measure of his mistakes. Emma remained beside him. "Whatever it says," she said softly, "you'll handle it. You don't have to face it alone." The stranger took a deep breath and nodded. He opened the letter and read, his eyes flickering with emotions, fear, guilt, and a flicker of hope. Emma didn't pry, letting him process it in his own time. But she could see that the challenge he now faced would test the trust and strength they had built together. That evening, the diner felt heavier, yet also quieter in a way that allowed reflection. Emma cleaned the table slowly, her mind filled with thoughts about courage, forgiveness, and resilience. She realized that life was full of unexpected trials, but it was also full of opportunities to rise above them. And she understood that her role in the stranger's journey was not to fix everything, but to offer support, understanding, and a steady presence. Over the next few days, the stranger took steps to confront his past. He made phone calls, visited places he had avoided, and faced people he had wronged. Emma continued to welcome him to the diner, offering meals, conversation, and patience. She noticed subtle changes in him, a deeper confidence in his voice, a lighter step as he walked through the door, and a more relaxed expression on his face. He was learning slowly that confronting the past did not mean being defined by it, and that mistakes, though painful, could be the foundation for growth. Emma also learned important lessons about herself. She realized that supporting someone through their challenges required strength, patience, and empathy. She saw that love and connection were not just about comfort. They were about courage, the courage to face fears, the courage to forgive, and the courage to stand beside someone even when the world questioned it. Through the stranger's journey, Emma discovered a resilience within herself she hadn't fully recognized before. By the end of the month, the diner had become more than just a place for meals. It had become a sanctuary for healing, trust, and connection. The stranger had faced some of his past, and though there were still challenges ahead, he was stronger, more aware, and more open to the possibilities of life. Emma had grown alongside him, discovering that her quiet life could hold depth, excitement, and meaning in ways she had never imagined. And though the path ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear. Together, they were learning that even the heaviest burdens could be lightened by understanding, compassion, and a willingness to face challenges head-on. The diner, once a place of simple routines, had become a space of transformation for both of them. And in that shared space, Emma and the stranger were discovering that life, though unpredictable, could be full of hope, growth, and connection. The days at the diner had changed in ways Emma could never have imagined. What had once been a simple routine of cooking, serving, and cleaning had become a part of a story far bigger than herself. The stranger, whose presence had first stirred curiosity and caution, had become a constant part of her world. Their bond had grown through shared stories, trust, and understanding, and now Emma sensed a deeper transformation in both their lives. The stranger had faced much of his past, confronting people and situations he had long avoided. It had not been easy. There were moments of fear, regret, and doubt, when he wondered if he would ever truly escape the shadow of his earlier mistakes. But Emma had been there, quietly supportive, offering a listening ear, a comforting smile, and unwavering faith in his ability to change. Slowly, he began to believe in himself again, learning that the past, no matter how heavy, did not have to define the present or the future. Emma noticed subtle shifts in him every day. He walked taller, with less hesitation in his step. His eyes, once guarded and wary, now held a softness and warmth that mirrored the kindness he had found in her. He smiled more freely, laughed more easily, and even shared small joys without fear of judgment. The diner, which had once been just a place to eat and work, had become a sanctuary for both of them, a place where trust, healing, and connection flourished. The town, too, began to notice the change. The whispers that had once followed the stranger gradually faded as people saw who he was now, a man committed to honesty, responsibility, and kindness. The ranch hands, who had once been cautious and skeptical, now greeted him with genuine respect. They saw him helping with small tasks, sharing a word of encouragement, and showing a gentle, considerate side that balanced his quiet strength. Even the rancher who had once warned Emma about him now nodded in approval, understanding that people could grow and learn, no matter their past. Emma herself had changed in remarkable ways. Her days were still filled with cooking and serving, but there was now a deeper sense of purpose and fulfillment in every action. She had learned patience, empathy, and courage, qualities she hadn't fully realized she possessed until she faced the stranger's challenges alongside him. Her heart had opened in ways she hadn't expected, discovering that love and connection were not only about companionship, but also about resilience, trust, and the courage to embrace life's uncertainties. One crisp morning, as the sun rose over the hills and painted the fields in shades of gold, the stranger entered the diner with a quiet energy that felt different from before. He carried himself with a sense of resolve and hope. Emma noticed it immediately. There was a lightness in his step, a brightness in his eyes, and a calmness that radiated through the small space of the diner. He approached her with a small, genuine smile, one that conveyed gratitude, trust, and something deeper, something unspoken but profoundly understood. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice steady but soft, "about how much has changed, about everything I've learned and about you." Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest. She knew this moment would come, though she hadn't been sure when or how. She listened carefully, letting him find the words he needed. "You've shown me that people can be kind, that trust can exist even after mistakes, and that it's possible to start over," he continued. "You've changed my life more than I can ever explain. I don't want to leave this behind. I don't want to leave you behind." Emma's eyes softened. She had felt the same way but had never dared to speak it aloud. She realized that life had brought them together not by accident but by a quiet, purposeful unfolding. Their meeting had been the spark that ignited transformation, healing, and hope. "I feel the same," she said gently. "You've brought something into my life that I didn't even know was missing. You've shown me courage, understanding, and the possibility of love in ways I never expected." From that moment, their relationship blossomed in a way that was both natural and extraordinary. The diner, which had been a place of work and routine, became a space of shared dreams and aspirations. They laughed together, planned small adventures, and supported each other through challenges, both past and present. The stranger's journey of redemption was no longer solitary. Emma was part of it, and he was part of hers. As the seasons changed, the diner became a symbol of their shared story. It was not only a place where meals were served, but also a place where hearts were healed, trust was rebuilt, and hope was nurtured. Emma continued to cook for the ranch hands and townspeople, but her meals now carried an added warmth, a reflection of the love and connection she had found in her own life. And the stranger, once a figure of caution and mystery, became a trusted presence in the town, respected not for who he had been but for the person he had become. They also faced new challenges together. Life was never without difficulties, and occasionally the past would resurface in small ways, testing their patience and commitment. But each time they faced it as a team, leaning on the lessons they had learned from one another. They discovered that true connection was not about perfection, but about resilience, the ability to stand together, support one another, and continue moving forward despite setbacks. One afternoon, as they sat together after a busy morning in the diner, the stranger reached across the table, taking Emma's hand in his. "I want to stay," he said simply, "not just here in this diner, but here in this life with you." Emma smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. "I want that too," she replied. "We've come so far, and I know we can face whatever comes next together." In the months that followed, their lives intertwined completely. They worked side by side in the diner, shared small adventures in the town, and supported each other in moments of challenge and joy. The stranger began contributing more actively to the community, helping with ranch tasks, volunteering, and becoming a trusted friend to many. Emma found her world expanding in ways she had never imagined, filled with laughter, love, and a sense of purpose that went beyond the walls of her diner. The town, too, came to see their story as one of hope and transformation. People spoke of how a stranger with a dark past had found redemption, love, and belonging, and how a kind, patient woman had opened her heart to the possibility of change. Emma and the stranger's journey became an example that life was not defined by mistakes, but by the courage to face them, the willingness to grow, and the power of human connection. Years later, as they looked back on the day he had first walked into the diner, Emma often reflected on how much had changed. What began as routine, simple meals for hardworking ranch hands, had become a life filled with love, trust, and transformation. The stranger's arrival had altered the course of her life in ways she had never anticipated, teaching her lessons about patience, courage, and the extraordinary potential of ordinary moments. Together, they had built a life that was both simple and profound. The diner remained a cornerstone of their existence, a place where people came for food but stayed for the warmth, kindness, and understanding that Emma and the stranger shared. Their love was not dramatic or rushed. It was steady, resilient, and deeply rooted in shared experiences, trust, and respect. And in the quiet moments, when the sun set over the hills and painted the fields in warm hues, Emma would watch him, and he would watch her, and they would know without words that their lives had been forever changed. The stranger, once weighed down by his past, had found hope, belonging, and love. Emma, who had once longed for something more in her quiet, simple life, had discovered a partner, a friend, and a journey full of meaning. Their story, born from a chance encounter and nurtured by patience, understanding, and courage, became a testament to the power of human connection. Life, with all its uncertainties and challenges, had brought them together, and in doing so had transformed two lives forever. The diner remained a place of warmth, meals, and laughter, but more importantly, it had become a symbol of hope, healing, and the extraordinary changes that can begin with a single step, the simple act of welcoming a stranger with kindness. And as they continued to share their days, Emma knew one thing for certain. Life could change in the most unexpected ways, and sometimes the arrival of one person could open the door to a lifetime of love, growth, and possibilities beyond imagination.